Hello, everyone, and welcome to our new seminar on global Englishes. This time, we're hosting another person from our Spanish branch. Thank you again so much, Rima. And we are going to have a seminar on translanguaging and virtual English as a lingua franca. Quite, quite an interesting topic, quite close to what I do. And our guest today is Francisco Javier González Ruiz. So, uh, just you know the rules. We always record these seminars. So if you prefer not to be recorded, you can keep your camera off. That's fine. If you if you want to, you can pop questions in the chat as we go along because the chat is not being recorded. We can read them once we finish. And that's really all I have to say. Francisco, whenever you want, you may begin. Thank you again for coming here today.
Okay, thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Rima. And thank you, Desiree. It's not here, but I'm sure she is going to watch the recording later. So thank you for having me. Today, I'm going to be discussing about constructing personal identities on social media, particularly focus on translanguaging and virtual English as a lingua franca in those cases. And we have to know in this case that the impact of social media and communication is something that is huge. It has rise height spheres in this case. So of course we can provide some data about it. So we have like almost 5 billion of people are having a profile regarding social media in social platforms like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. And these are not just tools just for interactions, but they are spaces that for self-expressions and the creation and constructing of self identity in those cases. So we can say that social media has evolved just to turn into an arena and a virtual arena where people can negotiate their cultural, their linguistic and professional identities in those cases. And of course, they do in a fluid and a multifaceted way in those cases. So moving on, we have to talk about the different linguistic trends that are now in game at play in social media that are multilingualism, translanguaging, and virtual English as a lingua franca in those cases. Of course, regarding translanguaging, we can say that social media users, they tend to use the whole repertoire. They tend to blend all the languages they know just to communicate effectively in those cases. And just to, we can say in a way, just to construct, to form their identity in different ways. Professional identity or the social identity in those cases, and they can use different languages within a post. So we can see examples of different tweets in which we could use Spanish most part of the message, but the hashtags or maybe different images, they include different elements in different other languages. So in those cases, this is more specifically typical from younger generations, as my generations and the other ones that came later. But of course, these younger generations, they have the ability to navigate these kind of virtual spaces in which the language boundaries are really blurred because we mix different languages. We have different expressions that come from English or come from different other languages that we employ to communicate in these virtual spaces as social media are. Another interesting thing is just the virtual English as a lingua franca. Of course, we know that English as a lingua franca is a dominating in lingua franca in the world, in business, different fields, and of course, on our daily basis. But of course, this is really interesting because they enable users that have different lingua cultural backgrounds and they come from some context in which English is not the first language or the official language. They allow them just to communicate with native speakers or non-native speakers from different parts of the world. So, of course, as you may know, English as a lingua franca, they don't follow the standard. They refuse the English norms in those cases, although it respects them. Of course, we have that all these practices, they allow the users to engage in this cross-cultural communication that social media is if you have a Twitter account, you may know that discussions are infinite in those cases, and with people from different countries. So this encourages people to have to be more diverse in linguistically speaking in those cases. So of course, all of these practices allow people just to construct to their own identity. Of course, in this case, I'm going to be focused on tourism. These people are professionals, but they were also asked about their own use of social media. Of course, we could say that about Garcia or Canagaraja highlight these linguistic practices are not just communicative strategies, but it's essential to know how they craft their own identity and how they perform their identity when they are interacting with others. So, of course, this study also is going to explore the Spanish Tourism University graduates. I'm going to explain later that I struggle sometimes to obtain some data, samples from these students. But yeah, we are going to examine the different perceptions and attitudes they have. So regarding the identity construction, we could say that, that it's of course, they have performed the identity just through languages and visual elements. We are going to deal with these visual elements, not only visual, but oral, spatial, gestual, textual linguistics in the literature review section. Of course, we could say now that translanguaging and virtual English as a lingua franca is going to help to shape the digital identity in those cases. So by examining these students, this kind of students, Spanish Tourism University students, we want to just provide insights of the multilingualism and the different linguistic practices that are not at play in social media, as virtual English as lingua franca and translanguaging in those cases. So we can say that in those spaces, the language is used like in a dynamic and fluid way. So I propose two questions, two research questions to be answered along all this process of research. The first one is the attitudes. What are the attitudes of Spanish tourism graduates towards translanguaging on social media? And the second one is about how do they perceive and utilize and use English as a virtual lingua franca in digital interactions. And of course, the multimodal strategies they use, I'm going to explain that later. Multimodal use, the practices they use when they have to communicate in this context, virtual context. So moving on the literature review. Okay. First, we have to provide a few definitions. For those of you who are not familiar with the term virtual English as a lingua franca, we could say that's basically just a basic definition. We could say that it's the use of English as a lingua franca in virtual spaces between users that could be from different lingual cultural backgrounds. They could be native English speakers or non-native English speakers. Sorry. And of course, we could say we have here a definition of one of my supervisor and a beloved supervisor. That's virtual English as a lingua franca communication, primarily among international users of English, in a specific context of use, namely that of making meaning disembodied online exchanges. Yeah, so in this kind of virtual spaces, we have the opportunity to make meaning and, of course, construct our own identity. We can say that this virtual term, this concept, this approach, virtual English as a lingua franca, it's draws upon four key theoretical frameworks: transcultural communication theory, translanguage theory, transmodal communication theory, and trans-epistemic different explorations in those cases. Here we have translanguaging is we can define it in a basic way that that's the use of the whole repertoire just in the sense to make meaning in different bilingual or multilingual contexts in which the users engage just to make meaning and have in an interaction. Of course, they employ the whole linguistic repertoire just to convey meaning. just fulfill their communication needs. Of course, this is what I was talking about previously, the multimodal communication theory by Koppe and Kalantzis. They propose that people use different modes, oral, spatial, gestual, textual, and linguistics, just to convey meaning, but at the same time make that conversation, that message deeper, provide deeper layers of meaning to that message, to that message in this case, just to make sure that all the communication needs and overcome all the communication challenges that it may appear. So yeah, using this, we make that social media communication that they evolve in those cases. So yeah, about using these communicative strategies is something that help us just to expand the message. And of course, in this case, make more effective in those cases. Because as part of my thesis, I'm analyzing different 4 official tourist accounts, and I'm analyzing these strategies and how they reach higher audiences using these kind of strategies, linguistic, and different multimodal strategies in those cases. Of course, we could say that in those cases, virtual English as a lingua franca interactions, they show to foster different pragmatic awareness and self-efficacy and motivations, even in students. So this is something interesting that teachers should have to be take into account, just to promote in their classes, because they are real world situations. They can use realia in those cases to use in their activities and so on. Yeah, specifically in tourism, because they have to sell, or they are going to work in accommodations, different hotels and so on. So they have to know how to sell, how to communicate effectively with people all over the world. Especially in my city, I'm from Malaga. And of course, we have people around the world. So we have to be able how to communicate with people with different lingua cultural backgrounds. So this is something really interesting in this case, and it's something to take into account. Of course, virtual English as a lingua franca and at the same time translingual practices, they enable the users just to experimentate with their own identity and how they are perceived by others, depending on the way they express themselves, they communicate themselves, the different strategies they use when they just simply write a tweet. So, of course, it's also something that helps to shape their own lingua culture and real-life identities in those cases, according to Gondos, Grubera, and Karnowska. About the methodology is under construction. Okay, so it's a work in progress in those cases. I struggle to obtain different data to have access to students, because I not teach at the university, so I have to just write different posts and in social media, and just to keep attention and attract friends or people that I know, just to give me 5 minutes to answer this. But of course, I'm going to explain a little bit more in deep this. I'm using a mixed methods approach, because I have quantitative and qualitative approaches. In those cases, I have used online surveys using Google Forms, classic. Probably you have used this tool different times. And of course, I use that just to ask those students about language ideology and identity, the attitudes and perceptions they have towards these linguistic approaches. I have spent 3 weeks, but I'm going to spend more time, because I got good results, and I think they are going to be interesting for the future. So I'm going to keep researching on this. As I said, I have minor challenges regarding the sample size. I only have 21 participants, but in the future, I would like to expand that number. So, of course, I provided real samples, 2 examples of the tweets. that are used by official tourism accounts that I have analyzed for my thesis. So in this case, I have planned semi-structured and open-ended interview, but this is for the future. Of course, I'm going to try that some of these participants have an interview with me about their perceptions and attitudes and how they think about it. And of course, the aim of this is just to identify the differences and similarities in multilingual usage in this virtual context, and all the different practices, multimodal practices and translingual practices in those cases. Of course. Okay, about the data analysis. I would like to identify the common patterns and experiences that these students have and how they perceive themselves when they are communicated in a virtual space with different languages, or if they just use their own native language, and how they are perceived, they think they are perceived by others. Of course, I have to take into account the BELF approach and multimodal discourse analysis and translingual practice theory in those cases, just to have some notions about these perceptions and attitudes and all the framework I have to work with for this research. Okay, now we are going to move on the important part, the findings. Of course, first, we have the age. Most 71% of the participants were between 25 and 34 years. So, and the other ones at 18, 24, more of them are just people that have recently finished the degree in those cases. Others, they have few experience after the university stage in those cases. Something really interesting, and I would like to focus probably in the future, is about the gender, and to see if the gender influences in this or not in the case of Spanish university graduates. But 81% of the participants were female, and only 19 were male. I don't have any non-binary reply to this, but if I have the opportunity, it would be nice in the future to have more answers in this case. Yeah, of course. Some of them, as I said, I struggled to obtain some replies, but I have different mixture. Grado superior or FP, it's something that's a professional studies that prepares you to work in that profession in those cases. So we have a huge part of them, it's related to that. But most of them, 47%, it's they are studying, or they obtain a master's degree, so they keep studying after they finish the degree in those cases. And 9.5%, they even started to study a PhD in those cases. I don't know if this is going to influence in their answers, but in some cases could be. It's possible to say that they struggle sometimes when they had to communicate using English or using virtual English as a lingua franca in those cases. Yeah, regarding the social media, the most used social media, of course, is Instagram, because they have many different modes, as I explained before. You have the reels, you have longer videos, you have pictures, you have many different items that you can use and you can post in this social media. Second one, in this case, is TikTok. Again, similar to Instagram, we have short videos that are really effective and really addictive in those cases, and you can spend hours watching those videos. And then we have Twitter. That's the social media that I know most because of my thesis during those years. And of course, here we have a huge presence of different multilingual scenarios in which they have to communicate with people around the world, especially depending on the themes, depending on the topics they have encountered like many different nationalities just within a discussion. Okay, what's the purpose of social media use? One of them socializing, of course, others entertainment, and 28% says that they just to follow the news and current events. It's important to say that I give the chance to participants to answer in English or in Spanish, just to make them feel more comfortable in those cases. So I'm going to translate the most important examples or excerpts just to make sure you understand what they are saying. Okay, so focus on virtual English as a lingua franca and translingual practices. We can say that, are you familiar with the concept of translanguaging? 21% say yes, 28% say no. Here in Spain, most people, probably the first encounter we have with translanguaging or translenguaje in español, in Spanish, is that those that we refer to Spanglish. It's a mix of English and Spanish and so on, but in fact, this could be a way of translanguaging those cases. So most of them, they are aware of this concept. Of course, they were asked about the use of multiple languages in their social media posts. 57%, so more than half of them, the participants, they say that sometimes, yes. And in this case, they use mostly English and Spanish, because some expressions or some words or terms they are taken from English and they use it. Yeah, 28% says rarely and 9.5%, so always. So just few a portion of the participants they never use more than one language in those cases. What language do you primarily use when posting on social media? Of course, 19 participants, 19 out of 21, they use Spanish, because most of them they are native. Of course, it's more common to use that normally. And the second one is English. We have, it's interesting to see we have a combination of different languages in those cases. And we have one participant that use Hungarian, because this person knows English, Spanish, and Hungarian. So it's a multilingual individual. So it's really interesting to see to see her post. The motivation of choice of language when posting on social media, most of them is just to ease of expression. So I use English and I use Spanish just to reach higher, and in this case, just to I feel more comfortable when I express myself doing freely, using all the languages I know, all the linguistic repertoire I have in those cases. It's interesting that 14.3 and 14.3 in this case is about audience reach. That's something interesting in tourism, because normally these accounts, they tend to use multiple languages and multiple modes just to reach higher audiences and engage these potential visitors, just to, as if they were clients, they have to visit their countries, these destinations in those cases. And cultural identity, that's something really interesting, because sometimes depending on the way we express ourselves, we are going to just make the others perceive by us that they are our cultural identity is one or it's another, and it's something really nice and really interesting to see those answers. How often do you use different languages within a single pulse of conversation on social media? We have 38% like sometimes, 28% often, and 19% like rarely. So we have just 9.5% that it's always in those cases. So most of them, they tend to use different languages when they are posting something on Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. Of course, we have here some answers. I'm going to, some of them are in English, others are in Spanish. I'm going to translate the most important ones. I asked them about how the usage, the multilingual spaces are going to evolve in the future, the use of these multiple languages on social media and how going to evolve in the future. Some of them says that normally it's going to keep the same way. Some of them says that depending on the language, but if we speak English, and here, dependiendo del idioma, if we speak English, it's going to be keep rising its usage between the following generations or the younger generations, that they're going to see something like normal for us. Other one says that the use of Spanglish is going to be more common. Probably this person thinks that Spanglish, for this person, Spanglish is something like translanguaging. So it's going to be more common in social media. And of course, English is going to have more influence, much more influence on social media, of course. In English, as you may notice, we will continue to mix the languages even more and give literal translations in those cases. So some of them argue about translators and ChatGPT and different things like about that. Others that they highlight that it's a good opportunity to communicate with people from other places. I think that's really positive. Yeah. Vamos a ver un poquito más. Okay. So we have more answers. Some of them, as I said, this person thinks it won't change much, as we know we do now. So it's going to keep the same. More people will use multiple languages. I think the future we will only use English on social media. Okay, interesting. Of course, creo que seguirá usando como hasta ahora. I think it will be using the same. So we have conservative opinions, and we have some of them that are evolving and have a perception towards the use of multiple languages, and the social media will become a multilingual space for all of us in those cases. So that's something really interesting. Okay. Okay, so now we are going to move on identity expressions in those cases. Regarding how comfortable are you using multiple languages in a social media post? 9 of them says 4 out of 5. So they feel really comfortable using multiple language within a post. And 7 of them, they say 5. So we can determine that they feel really comfortable to use different languages when they are communicating in these virtual spaces. Of course, as I said, Spanish in those cases. ¿Qué tan importante es para ti expresar tu identidad cultural a través de tu uso del idioma en las redes sociales? How important is for you to express your cultural identity through the use of the languages in social media? So 8 of them say 4, so they agree, and 4 of them they strongly agree with that. So they determine that they use in this case multiple language, and it's really important for them to express their identity, their cultural identity, when they are engaging in a conversation in these virtual spaces. So moving on, maybe more. Of course. Do you feel that your language use on social media affects how others perceive your cultural identity? So more than half of the participants say yes. So for them, probably they know that if they use just Spanish maybe in English conversation, probably they're going to be perceived in a different way as if they use different languages, or if they use English, depending on the context, depending on the people. I think they know they are going to be perceived in a different way. And 28% they are not sure about this, and 19% say no. So for them, this doesn't affect at all. This is really interesting because yeah, that social media, we could say that social media can allow in these individuals just to create and express in multiple forms, multiple ways. And of course, they can use their linguistic repertoires in those cases. So the use of these different practices as translanguaging or virtual English as a lingua franca, I think they provide a flexible framework for users just to project what they call hybrid identities. I mean, their professional and their normal, the daily basis identity, their common identity. Of course, they can use different elements from their native language. They make that to be perceived as the part of the cultural identity and the linguistic identity in those cases. Of course, all the use of all this they enables individuals to engage in global conversations while they still keep intact their lingua cultural identity while they are engaging in those conversations. So yeah, we have different graphic elements. In this is the question that I ask participants to analyze two different tweets from official tourist boards on Twitter, and they have to provide their opinions and different comment on different aspects, interesting aspects that these tweets employed when they were posted. So they say, creo que expresen bien lo que quieren comunicar. This person thinks that they express correctly, they express well, effectively what they want to say. Some people say that in the first picture they use English words as hashtag to reach higher audiences, and the second one is the same. Yeah, they tend to say that the use of pictures to call the attention of the audience. So some of them they are aware that some of these strategies or the use of certain strategies they are used just to reach higher audiences and to appeal potential visitors or use all the users. Of course, in Spanish, although the preferred languages in both posts is Spanish and then English, they use words in other languages just to attract the public, the audience. For example, the first publication used the term machine. En mi opinión, lo usan para atraer. So in my opinion, they used to attract diverse people and not just Spanish speakers. So in those cases, it's interesting this absurd because the term machine in the post they employ different images of dogs just to explain the term machine, because maybe for Spanish speakers or other speakers they are not aware of what's this. So they employ different modes just to make the message more complex and make sure that the message is effective and everyone understands the intention and the whole message. Okay, moving on a little bit more. Okay. Oh, the interesting accents que se haya utilizado that the Anglicism, the English word machine, instead of using a phrase or words that's equivalent to Spanish, they use multiple languages just to expand the audience. The hashtags just to call the attention they are in English. This one is really interesting. Tenemos el translanguaging tan integrado que no notamos que hay dos idiomas. So this person says that we are so aware from translanguaging, the concept of translanguaging, and it's become part of our daily basis that we don't even realize that we are using two languages or they are using two languages in those cases. So this one's really interesting. It's really interesting because we are surrounded in this globalized world. We are surrounded by multiple languages, and sometimes it's so normal for us. We don't even realize that they are surrounded. We are surrounded by multiple languages. So yeah, This person also say that it's really interesting to mix different languages. Of course, they use English and they tend to their meaning in Spanish. This helps people that is not so proficient in English language to know a little bit more. And this is something really interesting because when users employ virtual English as a lingua franca, when they engage in this kind of communication, that virtual English as a lingua franca, it's used, it's present. Those users that are not so proficient in English, they tend to overcome a few challenges. They have some challenges that they have to overcome in those cases, whereas others that are more proficient in English, they tend to convey meaning and negotiate meaning, and they have more facilities, just um, to negotiate and construct their identities, their language cultural identities, their professional identities, and so on. Of course, moving on a little bit more. Yeah, basically we have here, now we are going to move on to discussion. Of course, but we can say that the prevalence of translanguaging and virtual English as a lingua franca. Of course, as you may notice in some of the replies you have seen during the analysis, translanguaging is a common practice in digital communications, especially among Spanish graduates. They tend to use English mostly, but they make a combination of both, or even other languages like Hungarian, for example. Of course, it's interesting to see how these graduates, how these students, they feel really comfortable to engage in those virtual spaces and use different languages in those cases, multiple languages, in their posts and when they have to communicate with others. As I said, normally they tend to blend English with Spanish, just combined both languages at the same time just to communicate effectively. Of course, they do that just as a way to ease their expressions and to reach higher audiences. Of course, if they have different international friends or other people they know, they use English just to communicate more effectively and to be perceived in a certain way as part of their identity in those cases. Of course, language mixing and identity construction, multilingual users that blend languages, normally they do so as a way to reflect both their cultural heritage and their professional aspirations, because most of them, they tend to be fluent or to have certain level of proficiency in English, just to be perceived in their professional field as they are good professionals and they are able to communicate with others in any kind of situations. And of course, they tend to do so and by keeping their cultural identity, by keeping their native or part of their culture elements that makes them unique in those cases, and to express these identities. Of course, translanguaging, as I said, they support this expression of identity, and of course, they aligned with these dynamic processes. Of course, when they have to communicate with others, they do in a fluid way and just to overcome all the different barriers, the different linguistic boundaries that exist in those days, that in some cases they are blurred, more or less. Of course, there's a strategy use of Spanish just for cultural identity and English for broader audience reach, just illustrating the balance between local and global identities. As I said, I'm Spanish, but I'm able to communicate in English, but I have different elements that define me, and I define myself as Spanish, a Spanish user of English, and I'm able to communicate with others, but I'm not going to reject or to refuse to be perceived as a Spanish person in those cases. And in other nationalities, the same. Regarding professional identity and social media, normally the use of different languages it has a positive impact on how they are perceived by the co-workers, by their colleagues in those cases. In this professional context, of course, this is more than welcome to use multilingual, multiple languages in those cases. And this is good to perceived by others. Of course, the use of BELF reinforces local and global identities online. On the use of English as a lingua franca, it's something really common in any kind of job related to tourism. That's the focus of this research, because this is the common language we use just to communicate and to express ourselves when we have a problem or something like that. So yeah, basically both transcultural, translingual, all the trans practices and virtual English as a lingua franca, and multimodal communication, they are combined and they are really effective when they have to create their own identities and how they are perceived by others. Virtual English as a lingua franca in multilingual settings. Normally, English is the common language, is central, but normally, according to the replies of the students, they are combined with Spanish just to have global conversation, but keep at the same time their local identity. Of course, as I said, the use of virtual English as a lingua franca encourage dynamic communication, but at the same time without abandoning those local languages and those local elements. Of course, they use this just to go global, but at the same time keep local. Just to conclude, we can say that the power of multilingual communication, these practices enable flexible and expressive communications across those linguistic barriers we have. And in this case, all the participants, they tend to mix Spanish, English, probably combination of all of them, even Hungarian, just to broader audiences, and they aim to preserve their own cultural identities in those cases. As I said, the blending of different languages, they allows users to express themselves in a professional, cultural, and social way. And all the roles they have to perform we have to perform in our daily basis is something that it's really important. And using different languages, they help us to do in this task. Of course, if we have different language skills and we know multiple languages, we are able to speak multiple languages. Of course, this enhances our line's presence, and in professional contexts, this is something really interesting. Future outlook, of course, as we know, social media is something that keeps evolving all the time, keeps changing all the time. Probably you use one meme and you have seen one video, and probably in a month you don't even remember that video, or there's something that's trendy nowadays and it's keep changing and moving and moving and moving. So of course, in this case, the language used in these virtual spaces is going to shift in those cases. Probably people are going to become familiar to use multiple language while they are posting or while they are communicating or even emailing their coworkers, and the way they are perceived and they construct their own identities to just to make sure they keep their own values and their own culture that are going to be perceived by others, of course. This growing global communicative space, as social media is, this challenges those traditional concepts of monolingualism. Because in the case of virtual English as a lingua franca, all the different practices we have discussed so far, all of these, they challenge these traditional concepts of monolingualism or the standards of English. And of course, they overcome those boundaries and they propose and they foster multilingual spaces multilingual virtual spaces in those cases. And of course, for the future, I'm planning just to conduct a few interviews with some of the volunteers that have participated in the survey. And this future research, of course, is going to examine how digital communication is changing and online discourse is changing and it's evolving, and the different practices that online users employ just to communicate in an effective way, effectively. And of course, how all of this, they affect in the way we are perceived and the way we construct our identity, lingual cultural identity or professional identity in those cases. Just to finish, thank you, gracias, gracias, grazie, danke, obrigado, arigato. You have here a QR code with all the bibliography I have used for this seminar. I hope you like it. I have worked hard on this, and I struggle and I suffer many times with the problem of the sample and obtain replies by tourism students. But it has been really rewarding to research during this time. So I hope you have enjoyed my seminar, my presentations. And thank you, Paolo, Rima, and Desiree for all of that, and all the online audience we have, and all the people that is going to watch the video sooner or later. So thank you very much. And I'm going to be glad to reply all the answers you may have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Francisco. That was great. Definitely, if anybody has any questions, please turn on your microphones or put them in the chat if you don't want to be recorded. Yes, Hind. Hello. We have our
Hello,
first
everyone.
question.
Yeah, sorry. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Vito, thank you, Francisco, for the presentation. It was really awesome, and it seems that it's a lot of work, and you have been through a lot, especially in social media. And but I have a question regarding that. You mentioned that social media is always about, maybe it's not always like to express our identity, but what about people that are trying to hide their identity in social media? Maybe conflicts, or maybe they are afraid. People, maybe bullying. In social media sometimes. So people sometimes they change, or maybe I don't know if you ask your participants if they have different accounts in Twitter or in X. Maybe they have a different identity than it's shown in the original one. I think because this is what I can see, for example, in the Middle East, people they have different accounts in social media, and and for myself, like I like to keep my identity hidden. I don't know if you encounter any something like that, and even people that time to change their language, or they change their, they don't look like in that country. For example, like a Saudi, or maybe they look like Egyptian, or I don't know if you encounter something like that.
Thank you for your question. Your name is Him.
Hint, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your question. The question is really interesting, to be honest, and it's something that could be research
Yeah.
about how people in certain way, depending on their context, their own lives, or depending if they are in settings or in countries that they are in conflict, or they have to keep a certain identity to be perceived by others, because otherwise they will be considered like something that's wrong or it's not so correct by their eyes. But yeah, it's something really interesting to research, and I think the good way about this flexibility, that using multiple multilingual and multimodal practices allows users to create their own identities, not just to be perceived in a positive way or in a certain way by others, but also because they have certain conflicts they have to hide, and or as you say, bullying, or different parts of the world they have to hide how their own identity or their own values, because of just to avoid any kind of confrontation or so on. But yeah, the flexibility that this allowed enables us just to create their own identity, even if you create that to hide from conflicts or just to hide these problems we have. But yeah, it's really interesting to see and to explore, to see what we can get from that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice.
And also, I want to have a question about how do you like how could you manage to collect data? Like, I mean, to collect participants, like it's like snowball, or like you are, I don't know if you or you create your own account or like your own zone, to and ask people to volunteer, or sometimes they create their own community for research, for purpose of research, and ask people to communicate in that research in that community, or you just do it randomly.
Yeah. Okay, another good question. Yes, in this case, I struggled to obtain different replies, but in this case, I tend to use my own social media just to communicate with friends and people that I know that they have studied tourism at university in those cases, and in at different levels as well. But I receive different replies from colleagues of my research project that I haven't mentioned. That is this one, this Elfin project. I receive certain replies by them. They tend to teach in this degree, and they offer to just conduct the survey, to pass the survey to other students. So in the future, I'm going to expand the sample, and I think I'm going to compare the students I have, that most of them are from Malaga, with the students from Lleida, which is the other university that participates in this research project. And I think it's going to be really interesting to compare how they perceive themselves, or the perceptions, the attitudes they have towards these linguistic and multimodal practices. And yeah, they offer me that, and I'm sure I'm going to take the opportunity to do so, and expand this research and compare and contrast the context, different contexts here in Malaga and in Lleida in Catalonia, in those cases. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the answers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the questions. They were so interesting. I love those.
Thank you so much, Ida. Hello, Shuye. Yeah, ask your question.
I'd like to meet you all online. I think it's a very nice talk. I have a question about the definition. Do you think you resolve the concept of translanguaging into both multilingualism and multimodality? And if you understand translanguaging in these kind of definition, what is the difference between translanguaging and VLF? Do they overlap each other?
Okay. Let me see if I understand the question. What's the difference between virtual English as a lingua franca and translanguaging?
Yeah.
That's the question? Okay. In this sense, as I know, virtual English as a lingua franca is just the use of English as a lingua franca in those virtual spaces between different users. They can be native or non-native English speakers in those cases. Whereas translanguaging is just the combination of your whole linguistic repertoire. Imagine, probably, I assume you're Chinese, right?
Yeah, I am.
Probably you use English, you use Chinese, and if you know a few words in Spanish, like hola, gracias, and so on, you use them to communicate with people that probably they are Spanish. I teach Spanish as a foreign language, and I have students from different parts of the world, and I know a few words in Polish and in Hungarian. And when you use it to communicate with them, their perception they have changes. So because they understand it in a better way, especially if they are not proficient in those cases. But to focus on your question, just translanguaging for me is just the use of different languages, the combination of different languages of your whole linguistic repertoire, just to communicate in an effective way and engage in conversations between the other users of all the other participants are bilingual or are multilingual, but we use that just to communicate in an effective way and overcome all the communicative challenges and misunderstandings they can appear while the conversation is taking place. So for me, I will define those terms in that way. I don't know if I have solved your question, but yeah.
Okay, may I have one more question about the definition part because I'm really interested in that. In the study, you've shown that you have some survey together with those students and ask them about how do they use different language together and how do they blend different resources of the mini-making system. And another question about the definition is that, do you think translanguaging is code switching plus multimodality resources?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, there's a conflict. There's a conflict between code switching and translanguaging, but basically they are not the same. And there are several scholars that they have argued about this. They try to define in different ways. They try to explain this in different ways. But I don't think so. I say that translanguaging is something that go beyond that. It's just a mixture of languages you are learning or you're acquiring, and you use all of them just to communicate in a good way, in an effective way. While code switching is just to turn from one language to another. And it's something really different. And there are some scholars that argue about that. I recommend you one book by Jason Zenoz that it's focused on pedagogical translanguaging. And one of the first chapter, I think, they explain really well the differences between this code switching and translanguaging issue. I recommend you as well another book that it has been written by Mesut Bison and Rino Bosso. That's Virtual English as a Lingua Franca. It's a book really interesting, and they have different books focusing on pedagogy and on the pedagogical part and other different areas related to Virtual English as a Lingua Franca. And I think you are going to go deeper in these two complex terms and the differences between them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Could you help to type these two books you recommended in the chat box?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, thank you so much. And I have another one question about sample. I promise this is my last question. Because in the title that you told us, the sample is Spanish tourism university graduates. So do these sample have some features in their identities? Why do you choose them?
Can you repeat the question, please? I was looking for the book.
Sorry. I would like to ask you again. In the topic that you told us, the sample is the Spanish tourism university graduates. Why did you choose them as your samples, and do they have some features in their identities?
Do they have features on their identities? Well, I choose those students, especially tourism students, because here in Malaga we face a context in which it's multilingual context, in which we face multiple languages at the same time, and we have to communicate with different people at the same time. But regarding the cultural identities, it's of course most of these students are from Andalusia, from Malaga. Of course, we have a rich culture in those cases, but no, I didn't choose the participants because they have any particular cultural feature or any particular feature. I'm just the only thing I just want to focus is that they were tourism university graduates, or they have certain studies about tourism. But no, I didn't focus on any specific features regarding their cultural identity or their identity at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
You have the name of the book, Virtual English as a Lingua Franca, in the chat. I hope you can see it.
Is that the book you recommended that which divides those definitions about code switching, translanguaging pedagogies?
That's the second one. I'm going to give you the first one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco, for taking the time to answer the questions and also for typing the book in the chat. Once you finish, I'm going to read them again so that the people who are watching the videos later they can also follow it afterwards. I'm going to wait for you to post. Okay. Thank you for putting it there. So there is one thing I wanted to ask. This is a very specific question about the literature review, but I don't know if you will remember this. Because here in the literature review, you mentioned a couple of studies in which in which you said, oh, these people have looked at motivation. They're looked at the effect of these things on. Yeah. Do you happen to remember what they did in terms of methodology? If not, it's fine.
Oh, wow. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they focus their research on different schools, on one specific school, but I'm not sure. I would have to revise or revisit the chapter that's also from this book. From this book, the last one I have recommended, but I think they focus on schools, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
All right. No worries. That's fine because I was really surprised because I didn't know those studies, and that's something that came up in my study. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I will have to explore it a little more. But
yeah, it's accessible. This chapter is accessible for everyone, I think. So you could take a look if you want. Yeah.
all right. Does anybody have any other questions for Francisco? We're really taking a lot of his time.
Yes, I understand we're very short of time, so maybe one short question. So when can we expect your final research results?
Wow.
I'm not sure at what stage you are. That's why I'm asking. Is it will 2 years or 3 or more? What's your timeline?
Do you mean my thesis or this particular research?
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to answer that question. Of course, in regarding my thesis, I'm starting the last year. So it is supposed that by this time next year, I have to define my thesis, the viva. And regarding this research, it's an early stage. As I said, I only spent 3 weeks doing this, and I have to design the survey and so on. That it take a couple of days. But yeah, it's an early stage because I'm planning to expand the sample using the students of Lleida if it's possible, and compare their perceptions and attitudes. And I have also to record the interviews and analyze them, transcribe them. So I would say that an early stage, and I think it's going to be really interesting to do something in the future, probably an article or something like that, but I'm not sure yet. I would say early stage. That's the answer.
Thank you. Good luck with it. And we are looking forward to your further research results.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope you're going to get more participants if you're still looking for them. I know what it's like to be at that point. So yeah, definitely wish you all the best for this. Before I stop the recording, I'm just going to read aloud the books for the people who are watching the videos, since the chat is not being recorded. So the books that Francisco suggested to further explore the topics of his literature review are Virtual English as a Lingua Franca by Pineda and Bosso, Pineda and Bosso. And the other book is Pedagogical Translanguaging by Cenoz and Gorter. Okay, so in case you missed them before, you should be able to find them now. Thank you again so much for this, and anything, if you're going to come back with some contribution for Alien, if in a couple of years you want to show us the final results, you are very welcome to come back. But thank you again for this session, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you everyone for attending.